Hi there, and welcome back to another special spotlight edition of ScaleUp Radio, the podcast inspired by the Entrepreneurial ScaleUp System and designed to make navigating our scale-up journeys that little bit easier by learning from others' experiences. I'm Kevin Brent, and today we bring back Fiona McKinnon from the Moment Company and put her in the spotlight at our ScaleUp Club, and we give other business owners the chance to ask Fiona their questions around our theme of psychological safety. And we discover with Fiona how to create a workplace where employees feel safe, heard and appreciated. And Fiona shares tips on authentic communication, setting clear expectations and fostering a real learning environment. And we discuss common pitfalls like inauthenticity and fear-based language, and highlight warning signs such as quiet quitting and high turnover that you might spot in your business if things are a little bit awry. So tune in to learn practical strategies to build a psychologically safe and thriving work culture. And you're going to want to subscribe to ScaleUp Radio wherever you like to listen to your podcasts. And you can also nominate a guest for ScaleUp Radio if you know someone with an interesting scale-up story. And you can find out how in the show notes. So join us for now with a really insightful conversation with Fiona and transform your business environment.
Fiona, if you'd like to introduce yourself to our audience, and then we'll have our conversation.
Great. Thank you, Granger. 380, obviously my lucky number. I didn't realize so many episodes there. So thank you for that. And I really did very much enjoy our conversation. As you said in the introduction, I have spent 25 years in the ad tech and advertising industry, predominantly in the startup world. So although I have worked for some big organizations like The Guardian and CNN, I was working for startup departments within those larger organizations. So it means that I have a lot of experience in that startup and scale up world, which also means that I can completely appreciate the 24/7 nature of I've got to do it. If I don't do it and roll my sleeves up, who's going to? You're looking around for someone to help you with everything that you need to do to start up the business. And you look around and you find out it's just you. So I've definitely learned a lot along the way. And with that, a lot of things not to do. And I guess in the episode, Granger and I really explore one of the things I didn't learn to do was set boundaries, which I'm sure will come up in our psychological safety introduction. And one of those boundaries led me to having a complete physical and mental burnout. So it meant that I have spent the last 10 years regrouping, putting Humpty Dumpty back together again, and retraining as a coach. I'm also retraining as a hypnotherapist at the moment, and just bringing the knowledge of how to look after yourself, how to do good business in a more thoughtful and mindful way into organizations. And that really does start with how we look after ourselves. And that reflects the type of organizations that we build and attract, both in terms of teams, but also our customers. Who we are rubs off on who we sell to as well. So that is what I'm keen to share today. And happy to answer any questions as we go along as well.
Brilliant. Thank you, Fiona. And yes, it was a fantastic podcast and thinking about your journey and how you focus on things. So our purpose here today is to explore this concept of psychological safety. But to the rest of our guests, if you have any questions at all, Fiona, throughout this conversation, please put them in the chat and Kevin will facilitate a conversation at the end. So psychological safety, simple two words, but what is it to you, and how do you sort of think about it in a workplace?
Really simple answer to that question: I don't. And that might seem like a really controversial thing to say on a conversation around psychological safety, but that is because I feel like sometimes these phrases, these terms can be used in a way that can feel very overwhelming, particularly when you're trying to think, what does that mean to me and my organization? When actually, for me, what psychological safety, when I break it down, is something that's very personal to each individual, because it's about how we communicate It's about our belief systems. It's about the boundaries that we set. It's about our hopes, dreams, and wishes. And that's something that's very personal to us all. And so, as you said in your introduction, starting with self and being able to understand what all of those things feel like to me means that I know where my safety bubble is. And it's only when I know that I'm then able to interact with others, because there's both psychological safety in the individual, but also as a team dynamic. Because if you look at it from a dictionary definition, it's about communication. How can I communicate in a way that I can feel seen, heard, appreciated, and I've got room to grow? But that will be different for everyone. It's different from team to team. It's different within an organization, and it will also differ depending on the type of industry and organization that you work in. So to come back to your question about how often I think about it, I don't think about it as a specific concept. However, everything I do is based on creating a mindful, productive workplace that has a good foundation of well-being. So I feel safe to interact with you in order to develop performance, and in your worlds, to help people scale up. So that's the kind of like my short, long-winded answer. It's a bit controversial, and that I don't think about it. And I think just one last thing, it's important to say that, because I think there comes a lot of pressure from these kind of big buzzwords, and psychological safety is not something you can buy. It's not a tick in a box. It's not something you can go, yep, done. It's just how you interact with your team, with your clients, and how you set out your own vision in your organization. So it's something I think about every day, just not in that particular phrase.
Brilliant. No, that's what I loved about our conversations. We're challenging some of those norms when we're talking about that. So we're talking about feeling safe, building that really good communication approach, both with our people and our clients, building that individual resilience. So it's practical tips then, yeah. So those are your thoughts and ideas of what it means. What are some practical tips for a small business owner that is trying to, build some of that within their organization?
I mean, it's another buzzword that gets used an awful lot, but it's authenticity. So being really clear on what your vision is, what your communication style is, and the minute that you, and this is from my experience watching CEOs and leaders, the minute you try to be something that you are not, your team feels it. You feel it. It doesn't feel quite right. And whether that's from I've got to be strict today because I need this to be done, so I've got to get harder and firmer on deadlines, when you're normally it's okay, just whenever you're ready kind of person, immediately throws everybody off kilter, and they're like, did you mean it's okay to not hit the deadline? Or I'm confused, because there's a lack of authenticity and consistency with the type of framework that you're setting and setting of goals. So it's about being consistent. It's about setting those clear boundaries and expectations. And it's about being really clear in the strategy as well, and the level of transparency that you want to give in your organization. Psychological safety is not just saying everybody has to be kind all the time and everything is an open book, because sometimes we do need to make decisions in isolation. Sometimes everybody is not invited to the table, and that's okay. The difference is the expectation that is set around that. So when you say some of the practical tips or techniques, I would say being clear on your cadence and style of communication. How much do you share, and over what period of time, about the vision and the progress of your business? Don't be fearful of some less than positive news, because that ruinous empathy of everything's fantastic and we all love each other and it's great actually can make people feel less safe and secure, because behind your back, they're all talking about whatever it is that might be going wrong. So being authentic in that communication, regular cadence of updates on the state of the business, and just clear boundaries around what you will and won't share all help people feel secure and take them on that ride on the vision with you.
Thank you. Yeah, some really interesting thoughts there. That clear vision, communicating it well, keeping that.
Actually, you've just
going.
reminded me something not to do, which.
Oh, that's what I was going to ask you next.
Yeah, you just remind me.
What can go wrong then? You know, what from your experience, what can go wrong with when you're helping businesses do this? You know, so we can get some of that experience as well.
I spoke to a CEO who had said, I don't understand why I would need to work with someone around my performance and well-being, because 100% of my team are 100% happy 100% of the time. And I'm like, that is fantastic. Can you come and work for me? But how do you know this? And they said, well, I got a clipboard and I went around everybody's desk and I asked them, you like working for me, don't you? Everything's going great, isn't it? And they all said yes. And I'm like, not the best way to understand what's going on in your organization. So there's being direct, but you know, that is not an environment that is fostering safety, space to talk, and also space to be criticized, because it's so important that as leaders, we also get feedback, because good ideas and good business can come from anywhere in the organization. So if it's that kind of directive, that's probably a good example of a CEO who fully believed he was living in a utopian land of everything being great, but actually his team were very fearful to speak up because he was being too direct. So that's probably a recent example that I kind of recoiled when they told me that story.
Wow. Yes, that's a very direct approach. And anything else that could go wrong, or some advice of not what to do for our business owners?
I'm guessing none of you worked for CNN, so I can share this one, circle of trust. But a culture that is mandated from the top down in a slightly larger organization also tends to be less authentic. So in CNN, we had in the lift these huge posters on the wall with the company motto or the team motto, which said more fun, less fear. But it meant that every single day that I walked into the office, I was challenged with the word fear. And I question in my mind, what level of fear is okay? Less fear? What level of fear is there on a daily basis? And what does more fun mean? And who's deciding how fearful I feel? So that had a negative impact. I understand the sentiment and the intention of having a positive affirmation on the wall, but it actually created an environment where people did not feel that they could speak up, because the word fear was the first thing that we saw every morning as we walked into the office. So that was another classic clangor that I've experienced.
Wow. Yes. Yeah, I can see that definitely happens. Yeah. So, Kevin, any questions from anybody that's going on?
I've got a question, if I may. You mentioned becoming more curious about yourself, about me. You know, how do I go about that? I mean, I don't know how to start. Where do I start?
Well, you have 60,000 thoughts a day, apparently. And so I imagine in some of those 60,000 thoughts, of which 95% are the same ones you had yesterday, you might be asking yourself a question. Am I cold right now? Shall I walk this way when I open the door, or shall I walk a different way? What is that thing that I've been putting off, and why can't I make a start? So we are constantly asking ourselves questions all day long. And for me, the first element of curiosity was to understand what were some of those recurring themes, and what were the things that I was avoiding, and what were the things that felt, you can feel it when it feels a little bit uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And I started to go, well, why does that feel uncomfortable? What is it that I'm putting off? What might a different outcome feel like? And that is a simple question you can ask yourself on a daily basis. What might I do if I was to ask my favorite mentor? They could be living, they could be dead, they could be famous. I sometimes ask my dad who passed away, what would you do, Dad? And sometimes just asking an imaginary mentor, what would you do, is a way to get curious to see what answer might come up. So yeah, he usually says, you got it, kid, is what my dad usually says to me.
For our team and people that know Louise are one of those is, what would Louise say?
There you go.
Yeah.
I might start doing that too. What would Louise say? So yeah, it's a helpful reframe because it gives you permission to get it wrong because it's not your voice, but actually, obviously, it is coming from your subconscious. And I started to read as well. Listen to this great podcast, listen to other people and learn from their experience as well.
Brilliant. So we've got a question from Adam Pierce, a little bit on the lines of what you were saying there about being authentic, but how do you strike the right balance between pushing a team towards hitting a tough target at month end and making sure they aren't too stressed?
I think being really clear on what the goals and expectations are really important. And I think that psychological safety is also ensuring good onboarding, good training, good personal development, a good understanding of the individual and support that they've had in their role as well. And in NLP coaching, we talk about the whole on coming to work. So it's not always just, you can't detach that bit of the person that's pushing for the goal. You kind of have to look at the whole individual. So I would encourage one-to-one conversations as well as a team kind of like, what are we doing to strive this big goal? But sometimes someone might have something going on in their personal life that might be stuck, that needs that kind of one-to-one. And that's really good for psychological safety and also support towards hitting that goal. And also really clear, I think, just on what the expectations are and showing that you are willing to put in that hard yarn as well. And things, we don't hit goal every month. That's okay. As long as they're right, there's a reset. What can we learn from this? What do we do different next month? What were the challenges? And it's a kind of learning cycle, I think, is important. Things always don't go up and to the right? They go.
Okay. Yeah. Brilliant. Great. We've got a couple more questions from Rebecca. What would your 4-word motto be for your team rather than the CNN motto?
Oh, gosh. That's a really good question. Oh, well, do you know what this is not it. My boss within CNN, he was the president, he had badges that he gave out and they had JFDI on them. And do it. That was his 4-word motto within the More Fun, Less Fear. I kind of veer more towards his because I personally feel like a fear held me back from pushing myself a lot of the time, a fear of what other people might think, a fear of getting it wrong, when actually I just should have gone for it a little bit more. So maybe JFDI would be my 4.
All right, great. So Grant would like to know, how do you suggest managing competitive conflict within a team? Interestingly,
it's probably the one thing at Moment Company that we manage is the communication and challenge between teams, usually sales and operations. It feels like it's an age-old challenge of sales teams overselling and overpromising, and then the operations teams freaking out. So that is something that we probably are tasked with the most. Something that I find most success with is cross team projects. So finding some of the micro challenges within the communication and creating a project to solve a particular element of it, but having it hive-minded. So having teams from both sides coming together to solve those sticking points, because then there's an appreciation of points of view from both sides. Oh, I didn't realize that's what you did all day long. Oh, that's what you say when you speak to the client. And then they kind of problem solve within that department, and we try and keep leadership teams out of it and let the teams kind of manage it themselves. So that's been the most success we've seen, is micro project challenge sprints of that. So don't overplay it as well. 2-week sprint. How would you solve this? Work together. How would you solve this? Work together.
Yeah. Fantastic. Good. And maybe lastly for now from Craig, Helen is asking about the appraisal process. So anything specific you might suggest or that might be a bit more progressive with the aim of encouraging openness and personal development in that appraisal process?
So I think one of the most important things in psychological safety and in good high performance environments is having a good framework of well-being and groundedness. And that comes from having a process and a framework to kind of build the foundations on. So what we do and we recommend is a really simple retro and planning session where we have what's gone wrong that I want to kick out, what's going great and I want to keep doing it, and what do I want to do more of, and consistently asking for feedback and speaking to team members in that way means that they can feel progress for themselves. You've got documented challenges that they might be having, but it feels like a personal development conversation within some of those harder moments to manage. So it's simple traffic light, whatever it is that you want to call it, but it's what's going well, what's not going well, and what do you want to do more of? And that's how we have those harder conversations.
Brilliant. And maybe just quickly, if I may, Granger, just what what symptoms might you see if a business is lacking the trust and the psychological safety? Now, what some of the key things we might notice?
Well, for me, that trust and psychological safety equals good business. So it's everything you expect from a thriving organization starts to happen in reverse. So big problem I see in organizations right now is the quiet quitting. It's the kind of apathy to doing work just enough, but not really doing much more than that. It's absenteeism at its worst. It's toxic. So those kind of team frictions start to become real conflict.
Brilliant.
And then ultimately, obviously, it impacts your bottom line. People start to leave, and you're not able to strategically move forward because you're firefighting in lots of different areas.
I hope you enjoyed that discussion, and if you're building and scaling your own business, you might well be interested in our book, The Entrepreneurial ScaleUp System. And it's exactly what it says on the tin. It's a practical handbook around scaling a business in a structured way. And you can order a copy on all your favorite online retailers, including an audio version, or you can find it and other supporting resources on our website, www.esusgroup.co.uk. That's esusgroup.co.uk, which is esusgroup.co.uk.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.